All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to this week's episode of Unclassified. I'm Preston Stewart, joined by Ben Wheeler, and I requested to start today because Ben's going to go immediately off on some tangent that I can't keep track of for a while, and it's going to be hard to veer him back in. I just want to say that we're joined today, the co-host of this podcast is the producer, I don't know the right way to put it, of a top 31 podcast in the United States.
That is, well, it was number 17, but yes.
It was come on. I'm going based off of what people can see right now. If you go to Spotify charts right now,
yes,
you will find the In Good Faith with Philip DeFranco as the number 31 trending podcast in the United States. Notably, that is above Pod Save America, above Charlie Kirk, above Flagrant with Andrew Schultz, above the Midas Touch podcast. This is big. Above, let's see what else we got here. Above Armchair Expert, above the Megyn Kelly Show. This is no joke.
Yeah, no, I should rename the podcast to Midas Touch because everything I touch turns to gold. I mean, to get up that high, that's crazy.
Now this was kind of your. I want to make sure I frame this correctly. This was kind of like your baby, right? Like you were the one pitching, like Phil saying, like, "Hey, podcast. Here's what we're gonna do. Here's how we're gonna do it," and it took off.
Yeah, that's this is my baby. This is my idea, and I'm glad we're doing it. He's great to work with. He's very easy to work with, and really, I think all credit goes to him. I mean, it may have been my idea. I may produce it, but he is the one talking. So all credit goes to him. And
well, he's probably not listening to this, so we're going. All credit goes to Ben. Check out that in my words. So yeah, let's link it below if anybody's interested in checking that out because it's climbing the charts pretty quick. It's putting us a little bit to shame, but it's okay.
It does make our ascent look a little pathetic.
Yeah, for sure. But
all right, we don't have 19 years in the game here. Oh wait, speaking of us though, we should tell people to follow us on Spotify. We're only 75 away from 3K there.
That's cool. That's moving.
So yeah, so follow us there and give us 5 stars. But anyways. Preston, take us away.
No, I'm gonna hand it back over. That's the piece I wanted to get out, and that's probably I've kind of reached my peak of nice things I'm gonna say about you for at least the next 24, 48 hours. So let's get into it, man.
Of course. Well, I appreciate it. All right, so today we're gonna talk about Ukraine. We're gonna talk about Israel. We're gonna talk about tariffs, rates, and then I forgot to ask the audience for questions. So I have come with my own questions for Preston. And there's no real rhyme or reason. It's just around whatever my hyperfixation of the week is. And so this week it is about generals. So I will be asking about that. And I figured he's from West Point. He should know everything about warfighting.
No, I know.
If he doesn't, we should take away his degree. He's a DEI graduate. If he doesn't know the answers to these questions. So we'll find out. But
speaking of West Point, there was some uproar this week because people don't know what the term social sciences mean. And I saw people get genuinely angry online that West Point had social sciences because I think they interpreted that as like social engineering or, I don't know, like something woke and not, political science, international relations.
We don't want no history. Liberal arts education. Yeah, we don't want no liberal arts education. Get that out of here.
I followed some people down some of those rabbit holes and they were pretty dark, man. Yeah.
Dude, have you ever gotten into the discussion over Arabic numbers?
No.
Which are just numbers, but that's like, I guess, the formal name for our numbers is Arabic numbers. And when people don't know about it, they get really mad. No, we shouldn't be telling people about Arabic numbers. And I was like, okay, man, that's just what they are. So it's like same rabbit hole as yours. Yeah.
It's the question I love it when people go out on the street and they ask how they feel about women's suffrage, and people are like, "It's awful. We got to get away with that. Got to stop that right now. It's terrible."
Of course, yeah. I can't believe they put it in the Constitution. Suffering for women, crazy.
We can do better. Yeah. Yes. All right, let's do it.
Take us away here. What's going on with Ukraine and Russia? And the train that just passed by my house had an advertisement on it. Sorry, I couldn't figure out what it was, but it caught my eye, and I said it out loud. So sorry to disappoint
50% of its job there.
Yeah.
So went this week actually to go see a movie called 2,000 Meters to Andreevka. It was playing in New York City, It followed a couple soldiers from the Ukrainian 3rd Assault Brigade. Essentially, it was a tree line assault. It was 2,000 meters that they followed them, start to finish, and eventually their capture of the city of or town village is probably the best way to put it, of Andriivka. That just I want to start there because I feel like anybody listening would really enjoy that movie. It's only playing in a couple places now. New York City, I think it might even be done there. It's playing in the UK a little bit. Hopefully, it's coming to streaming before too long. Hopefully, coming to YouTube. But if it's near you, buy a ticket, go check it out because I think that's the best documentary I've seen on modern conflict in a long time. Probably going back to Restrepo with Afghanistan back in 2007, 2000. I think it was filmed in 2007. I don't know when exactly it came out, but holy cow, it's powerful and painted a pretty good picture of what this war looks like. Now, this week there's been a couple big developments. I have been outspoken that I don't think economic warfare is going to do anything to bring Putin to the table, but Trump continues to threaten that, and it looks like that might be in effect right now. So he made some statements last week that he's getting frustrated that Putin clearly is not changing his mind and hasn't made any overtures towards peace since Trump has come into office. And he said, I'm going to change my 50-day window and I'm going to reduce it. And it wasn't exactly clear if he was dropping it from 50 to 10 or 50 to immediate or what. The Russian response, by and large, was mocking him because, let's be honest, we've heard Trump drop a lot of deadlines at this point. And even with Russia, a lot of 2-week deadlines have come and gone. So understandable. Nonetheless, he announced a 25% tariff on all Indian goods sent to the United States so long as India continues to buy Russian oil. So this is a little bit different. There's no use in tariffing Russia, putting tariffs on Russian goods, because we just I don't know that we purchase anything from Russia at this point. Sanctions have been the most intensive sanctions regime in history, I believe, and Russia's still chugging along. So that's where my skepticism came from, of is it just window dressing? We're just going to layer something else on top? But this time it looks like he's going after, the United States, are going after the countries helping keep Russia's economy afloat, India and maybe even China. The initial indications are that it might actually have some teeth. So assuming they go into effect, which would be, I believe, in a couple days here still, that could cut off a significant portion of Russia's oil revenue. There were initial stories that some major Indian refiners or major Indian importers were already stopping their bids and stopping their purchases of Russian oil, which we just haven't seen that at all at any point quite yet. And then when looking at the Russian reaction, they went over the top. A lot of times this is nothing, it doesn't matter. We had Medvedev out there talking about nuclear war. Usually that's a pretty good indication that they're pissed off about something. And this is it. So
yeah,
progress, I think. Of course, you got to wait to see if the tariffs actually go into place, if India actually does not continue buying Russian oil. And then there will be an impact in Russia if that's the case. It'll be relatively near term, but then we'll have to see how that plays out across the Russian economy into their wartime economy.
That's interesting. I wonder, the India angle is interesting because I think there is definitely something we can gain there by not tariffing India. But China, I would be eager to see there be a crackdown. I know the EU has tried to go after China, and they've kind of been stopped by the U.S. a few times. But we know for sure they are aiding the Russian war effort. And they told, the foreign policy chief of the EU that they can't let Russia lose, because if Russia loses, then the U.S. and the rest of the West focuses on China. So I would like to see them crack down there. We'll see if they actually do. But I think this is a good start. The tariffs, the tariff thing is bizarre to me. I just put in sanctions, I guess. But tariffs.
I don't know. That's a little over my head. Trump loves tariffs baseline. I feel like he likes tariffs more than he likes sanctions.
Eric, yeah.
I don't know, maybe there's a part of it where he feels like it's a punishment, but if they decide to bypass the punishment, then we win or something. Whereas sanctions is just pure punishment. I don't know. I'm not going to try to get inside the man's head, but yeah, he's stuck with tariffs here. I guess it's kind of putting the ball in India's court rather than making the decision for them.
That's fair. That is fair. That makes sense. It checks out.
I mean, it is at odds, or kind of pushes back on the whole, the argument that seems to be everywhere is that who pays the tariff, right? Is it paid by, in this case, American consumers, or is it paid by Indian exporters? And in most cases, I feel like I shouldn't say that. It's up for debate, right? I feel like there's people making a strong argument in both directions. But if this is truly paid by the American consumer, then it doesn't really do any good to tariff Indian goods, because they'll just keep buying Russian oil, and then we'll have to pay more for stuff. So like it's like a cell phone, if that's the case. I guess the hope here would be that India would see a decline in interest in their goods, so they wouldn't.
So it is always the consumer always pays it, because that's how the tariffs work. So if the tariffs don't raise prices on the people, then they're pointless. The whole point of tariffs is to change how people's purchasing habits, right? So if I tariff 20% of goods coming from China, I'm trying to get people from China, or I'm trying to get people in the United States to buy less from China, right? And it's also to promote domestic manufacturing. If I'm putting in these tariffs in, and the companies are covering the tariffs, then you're not promoting domestic manufacturing, and you're not changing their consuming habits, right? That is like the key part that's missing from this administration's like policy. But like the whole point of tariffs is to change how people consume. And, companies have initially picked up this, but it won't always be that way. So
it makes me a little not super confident then, because it looks like some of the largest exports are pharmaceuticals and diamonds and precious stones. So when you're talking medicine, we tend to pay what is needed for medicine, and so much of that is slogged through insurance that, let's be honest, like those numbers change every day. Nobody really knows why in the first place. We just kind of assume insurance costs are going to get worse and worse every single day. So that would be one that would be easy to hide, I feel, or just tap in there, and American consumers wouldn't really know. And then diamonds and other precious stones, luxury items, that's one that, same thing. I don't know.
Oh, people will know if their prescription drug prices go up, I think.
Okay.
I think a lot of people are very conscious of it. I think people, they know. And I mean, health insurance will eventually have to pass that off to the consumer. The thing about the tariffs on India is that I understand what we're trying to do here. I don't know if it'll work, but I think it has to be, all this is driving the business community absolutely insane. So throughout all of Trump 1 and Biden, everyone's told decouple from China. Get out of China, go to Vietnam, go to Mexico, go to India, go to wherever and do your manufacturing there. And that's what we want you to do. So everyone does that. And now China has a lower tariff rate than everyone else, right? So it has to be driving the business community absolutely bonkers, because they did what the government told them to, and now the government's saying, the government's not really saying anything. They're just kind of throwing percents out there and hoping it lands.
So we're going to come back to tariffs, big picture here in the United States. Then I don't want to ask you some questions about that, but to kind of wrap up with Ukraine, not a lot has changed on the ground. We're still seeing Russian forces push in a couple areas in the east, Chasiv Yar, near Bakhmut. They're pushing near Pokrovsk, and then starting to move near Zaporizhia a little bit further west. Ukrainian forces retook some territory up near Sumy in the north. Looked like Russia may have overextended their lines a little bit. The big story, I would say, at this point are the quantity of drone strikes. We're seeing those continue to increase. Overall, the nightly total hasn't hit a record high now in like 2 weeks, which is good. But the overall volume of long-range drones and missiles is continuing to be through the roof. So we're seeing a big push inside of Ukraine right now for the development and manufacture and production of cheap interceptors. And that is something that it's a new innovation. It's really interesting. We'll see. Ukraine has some options right now they've been utilizing, but there's this window where we're really good at shooting down expensive long-range missiles, things like the Patriot and the THAAD. We figured out the crazy technology involved there. When you get helicopters, aircraft, for the most part, we're pretty good. We, people, are pretty good at finding ways to intercept those. These long-range strike drones have been a real problem because they've started to fly high. They're slow, which is kind of their weak point. But they've started to fly high to where they're outside the range of small arms fire, and they're too cheap to intercept with traditional surface-to-air missiles. So there's a gap there of how do we deal with these things. And what Russia has started to do, they used to fly in low and kind of come at a very low angle of attack. They've started coming in high and dropping down on top of the target. So even if you do intercept the thing with small arms fire, it's still going to go boom on or near the target. So Ukraine has been developing these, they have to be inexpensive but very advanced interceptors. And that's always a challenge, right? Like, how do we get more technology in quantity to solve this problem at low cost? And they've got a couple options right now that they're working with. They're really leading the way in that regard. And Zelensky's put in some massive orders. And if they're able to figure that out, it could be it could make a big difference in this conflict.
That's fascinating. And what do you think the long-term effects of it are?
Which part? The strikes or the interceptors?
Like the strikes and like the evolution of like what they're able to hit.
So they've gotten these Shahed or Garan style drones have gotten a lot more accurate, and they've also added in some Starlink panels or Starlink uplinks to them to where they're able to provide terminal guidance direction. So what they used to be, the first models where you plug in some coordinates, maybe provide a little bit of coming from the north and then hit from the east kind of thing. But generally speaking, it was a set it and forget it. We're seeing with some of these drones now, the Russian user is able to essentially log in at the right time and direct the munition onto its target. It's not something you would use to hit a moving target at this point. I mean, maybe ships, but it's not going after like soldiers on the ground moving from one position to the next. They're big munitions, but it can kind of refine that targeting at the last moment. That's increased the cost of these munitions a fair amount. But the big picture is the quantity. So they've at times fired 500, 600, 700 of these into Ukraine in a night, and there's just no real mechanism to effectively shoot those down. So we've seen Ukraine start to utilize, and Israel against Iran, start to utilize aircraft to shoot them down because they're slow moving, and you can get a helicopter up behind it or even a fixed-wing aircraft like an F-16 up behind them and shoot these drones down. But it's a serious effort. 700 munitions flying into your country in the span of a few hours is a lot to deal with. And, even 6, 7, 8 of them get through, which is if 7 get through, that's 99% effective rate. That can still do a lot of damage. So
it's crazy.
Yeah, right. These are huge.
I know we've talked about it before on here, but is there any utility of giving Ukraine these things that the embassy in Iraq has?
Sea-Wiz shoots like a stream of bullets.
Yeah, they like light up the sky. If they're so slow moving, or is it just a sitting target? What's the situation there?
Yes and no. So at a point, they could have been useful. Those are very helpful to defend point targets, like an embassy. Like, this is the target, one of only a few targets, and it can shoot things that are coming in at a relatively low altitude because it's shooting bullets, right? And the bullets can only go so high in the air compared with a missile or a rocket. So the challenge here would be that straight up quantity of this weapon system. Russia is going after everything from recruiting stations to manufacturing sites to rail yards to military locations to government buildings to housing locations, and then sprinkling in, I have no doubt at this point, sprinkling in some just straight terror use of the weapon, hitting high rises and things like that. So you would have to have one of these are very short range, close in defensive systems. So you'd have to have a lot of these across Ukraine, and they're not great for this size of munition because by the time the drone is in its terminal phase coming down on the target, even if once it's in range, it's still going to impact in and around the area it's planning to hit. So it just can't quite reach out as far as you would like.
Interesting. Do you think that going forward 10 years, do you think most munitions end up being missiles or drones in modern warfare?
It's this mix right here where we're using the term drone for what are essentially missiles. These Shahed Quran style things, like I don't know exactly what the terminology is that fits one or the other, but these are maneuverable. Like they're not rockets because they're maneuverable, but I don't know exactly where we draw that line between drone and missile. These carry the payload of traditional missiles. They have the range of missiles. They look a little bit more like drones. It's a combination of those two. I think we're going to see. My concern right now is I'm seeing the United States start to dabble in these, and that's not where our advantage sits. Like, we don't need more cheaper long-range munitions. We have cracked the code of being able to get a missile through where we need to get a missile through heavy air defenses, or drop a bomb on a nuclear facility in Iran. We've done that stealth technology, advanced weaponeering. We don't need to move backwards to overwhelming enemy air defenses and produce 10, 20, 30,000 of these Shahed-style drones a month, because we can get through a lot of those defensive systems right now. Like, we've cracked that code. We don't need to overwhelm them with quantity, but I think that is the direction our adversaries will go because it's cheap and it's pretty effective right now.
Yeah, I mean, you could do an EMP, right? I know. I feel like I just said something that it's probably is making people go
just bring the whole world down. Yeah.
Well, it's like when someone says, "Do you remember there was that Twitch streamer who was talking about NFL kickers?" And he said, "Why don't you just make it every time?" And I feel like I just said like the military equivalent of that. But yeah, maybe like a directional EMP. I don't know. I feel bad for the people at CSIS who just had to hear that out loud. But yes, maybe like a directional EMP. So
it's not a long-term defensive measure though. Like, it's the same idea as bringing satellites out of the sky or shooting down satellites or disabling a bunch of satellites. Like, short-term effect is there and devastating for a lot of people involved, right? An EMP is going to be just as bad for them as it is for us, kind of thing. But it's also not like a point defense. So if China, per se, were to launch 1,000 of these drones and we used an EMP in defense, like, it's going to mess up a bunch of our stuff, and then we've got the next wave to work around.
But I mean just like directionally, right? I don't know if we have that yet, where you just EMP that way.
It does sound in that direction. It sounds like there's some lasers being messed around with right now that could be useful, that in terms of cost of interception is effective, like $10 per cost of interception by the time it's deployed. So we'll see. We got to do something. We got to do something.
My most boomer opinion, is that I don't buy I don't buy the lasers. I know it's very Trumpian of me to say because it just feels like something he would say too. I just don't buy the lasers. I don't think I mean, apparently they work. They have them on some U.S. ships now, but I don't know. I don't buy the lasers.
That's fair. Yeah, it does seem like we've had lasers about to come out every year for a long time now. It's always like on the horizon. So who knows?
Yeah, there's always a laser. But speaking of lasers, Israel, what is going on there?
This is there's so many different directions to take this. In terms of the conflict, not a lot has changed. Hamas seems to be backing away from the negotiating table. They've laid out
three of them.
This is where I think this one gets so messy. Is you've got all these different aspects that you just don't necessarily have in Ukraine or even other wars. Hamas is backing away from the negotiating table from everything I've seen. We've got countries around the world starting to say they're on the verge of recognizing a Palestinian state, which makes some happy, makes others angry. The argument being that that is a reward for Hamas. Essentially, they held out long enough to be granted a state. But the big topic right now is the issue of starvation, the issue of humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip, and it is one of the nastier and more convoluted information spaces I've seen in a long time. And my gut says that the simplest solution, there's not a simple solution. I don't know why I started with that.
Oh yeah, it's all so simple there.
Yeah, real easy. Why don't you just X?
Yeah.
It's awful, man. Like, because you struggle with starvation should not be a tool of war, especially against a civilian population, certainly against children. And if there's any child in the and it breaks any rational human being hates to see a child hungry, right? And it's a war zone. So in war zones, you tend to see things like that, intentionally or not. But then we have some people in the Israeli government that have talked about this being a policy and wanting to essentially eliminate all Gazans and clear them out entirely. I haven't seen that dictated at the military level, down to the unit level. But I don't know. There's the question of, I think there's a big question here of intent that we can't, it's very hard to gauge. What is the intent of the Israeli policy right now? But then at some point you have to wonder, does the intent matter if the end state is still moving in a certain direction? And it's, look, we've got the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation operating in the South, and I think they've done a good job in putting out as much media as possible to push back on these different narratives. There's been times where we will see, originating from Hamas-affiliated channels, claims that hundreds of Gazans were shot, massacred in cold blood as they waited to pick up aid. I think every one of those at this point has been at the very least heavily exaggerated or fabricated. That's not to say there aren't, but there are innocent people that are still dying in Gaza. So, like, where's the line on that, right? New York Times just got hammered because they came out with a long article talking about the starvation in Gaza, and the picture they led with was a child with, I want to say, muscular dystrophy that was evacuated by Israel a few months ago to receive treatment in Italy. He's skin and bones. And the impression they gave was that he looked like that because he was starving. And it sounds like, no, it was actually, there's actually like a significant medical condition there as well. But that doesn't mean there's not hunger issues in Gaza. Do you know what I mean? It's nasty.
Yeah, so my stance on it, I think they are starving people. To the extent of it, I don't know, of course, but I think they are starving people, and I often think about what it would look like if the United States was there. And I know not every country is the United States of America, but we would not be starving these people. And we would continue our fight against Hamas, but we would not be starving these people. That is for certain. And I just think what's happening here is unacceptable. And with the recognition of a Palestinian state, I have long been a proponent of the two-state solution, and I think this is a good step towards it. Because if Netanyahu and his enablers are not going to allow that, I mean, U.S. policy has always been that the negotiations need to happen between Palestine and Israel. But since Obama, since 2009, Israel has not been willing to do so, and the Palestinians, of course, don't make it particularly easy. Of course, Arafat totally fucked the Palestinian people back in the 90s. There was that famous thing where Bill Clinton put his fist through the wall in the White House when he turned it down. Is Arafat his name? I want to make sure I'm saying that correctly. Okay, all right, good. I thought maybe I was mistaking him for a Turkish leader, but no, it is Arafat. Look,
Ataturk.
I think
you're thinking of Ataturk, right?
Yes, yeah, okay. I was like, all right, I wanted to make sure I wasn't saying the Turkish guy, but yeah, no, I think something's got to give here, and Yeah, Israel's just going to have to deal with Palestine being recognized, but I also think it opens up so many more vessels to get at Hamas if Palestine is a recognized state than it is if it is an occupied territory. So
I guess where my look, I'm sitting here safe in my home in Tennessee, right? So take this with a grain of salt, but where some of my frustration in this comes in is it feels like all we're getting are the extremes, and it's very hard to find. Like, my gut says that there's something in the middle. That in war zones there are often humanitarian crises. In war zones there's often a shortage of food. In war zones there is regularly a shortage of medicine. That is it. That happens, and it sucks. So I would be surprised if some of that was not the case in Gaza. But it seems like we very quickly move from that to the extreme of there are thousands, tens of thousands of children that are going to die this week because they're being starved, all the way over to there is no starvation in Gaza. Hamas is stealing the aid. And it's like it feels like there's a middle there. And the middle can still be bad, by the way. I just feel like every news source that I'm consuming tends to line up in one side or the other entirely. So part of the challenge here, and I get it, is like even steelman the stuff that I'm saying, where it's like, all right, well, there's a middle here, and then you have to answer the question, well, how many starving children is acceptable? I was like, oh, well, the answer is no, zero, right? Like, there's not a number I'm good with on that, and like, I don't think that's good at all. There's no positive to that, and I'm not going to defend the starvation of children. I think there's a schism right now in the United States. I think we're seeing it around the world. I think we've long seen it around the world, where people are getting frustrated with Netanyahu's execution of this war. And I do want to be specific there, because I feel like by and large what I've seen from the Israeli forces is a professional force doing the best they can in a very difficult situation. And I know the Israeli population is split. It's not entirely unified on continuing the war, let alone the exact strategy in the continuation of that war. But I think the transition from political objectives to military objectives has been poor. We still don't exactly know what an end state would look like in the Gaza Strip. If Hamas were to surrender today, it still doesn't seem entirely clear. I think we're seeing a lot of folks around the world that have long been frustrated with that, and we're a little bit insulated here in the United States because we have some of the most we've got folks in our government even where it doesn't matter what Israel does, there's going to be 100% support. There's no bridge too far at all, which skews perception a little bit.
Like that Randy Fine guy. Oh my gosh.
What's it? I don't know
Randy Fine is a congressional representative out of Florida who Ron DeSantis said is repulsive. But he's like Trump's guy, but Trump doesn't really associate with him. He's always saying stuff like, he said the other day we need to nuke Gaza, and that he thinks Israel should continue the starvation. I mean, He's really just saying insane things. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I don't know that policy is good for the United States, to be blunt. And we're watching it right now we're still seeing pretty continued U.S. support of Israel in just about every aspect. That, I think, for the first time is really starting to have an impact on our relations with other countries. Like a tangible impact.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, the fact that we're trying to leverage Canada's recognition, it's absurd. And these Arab states in the Gulf, they're all trying to work through this. They all came into the century hoping to make money with Israel, hoping to create a coalition against Iran, and now everyone's bogged down on this, It is absolutely absurd. And I think Netanyahu, he is making Jews around the world less safe. We've seen an uptick in anti-Semitism, and he just keeps going. And of course, that's not an excuse for anyone's anti-Semitism. My point is that he is producing the vector for people's hate, and he should stop. And I also think he has forever destroyed the image of Israel, because the Israel I grew up knowing, the Israel that I read extensively about, is one that will give up land for peace, one that will make major concessions for peace. We saw what they did with Egypt. We saw what they did with Jordan. This is a country that, prior to Netanyahu, sought peace at the highest priority. And now it's like endless war, endless occupation. I mean, when will it stop here? I think it's absolutely absurd in my view.
Yeah, it's I think we're going to see some changes there. I don't know what it'll be, but it seems like this is getting so much attention right now that there will be some sort of change. And I do want to say, like, to be clear, the goal of the eradication of Hamas is a good goal. It's a bad organization. And a lot of these groups, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the IRGC, the Iranian-backed militias, we share common enemies with Israel, no doubt. And Israel has, in a lot of ways, done us a favor getting rid of some of these organizations. So we do share a lot of the same goals, but specifically in how the war is being carried out in Gaza, I think we a while ago probably got to the point where it is a net drain on U.S. interests.
I 100% agree, and I don't see an end in sight. I mean, maybe there'll be enough pressure. The one country that can put a stop to it is the United States. But they have to actually do it. They can't Joe Biden it and half-ass it. They're gonna have to actually commit to doing something.
Let's shift over to tariffs, because I want to get your thoughts on some of this. I mean, last night I texted you. I got a notification that tariffs were going into place. I was like, wait, for real? That's a I can't keep up with what is and what isn't. And last night there was a list of a bunch of tariffs. So are those in place now?
They get implemented next week.
Okay.
Because
so the deadline is next
implementation. Yes.
The deadline is next week.
Yep, except Mexico, who got a 90-day extension because taco. Not because they have taco, but because Trump always chickens out taco, right? So they got another 90-day suspension. But I have it written down here. We're raising tariffs on roughly 68 countries, plus the EU, as part of the trade deal. Some of the tariffs are as high as 41%. We've put another 5% on major allies like the EU, Japan, South Korea, another 10% on large trading partners like India, Vietnam, and Canada, and that's on top of the already existing tariffs. Then we also have some pretty crazy choices, like 39% on Switzerland, 41% on Syria, and 50% on Brazil. And the 50% on Brazil is because they are prosecuting Bolsonaro for trying to overthrow the government, and Trump likes Bolsonaro, so that is in place. Interestingly, coming up here is that earlier in the year, that Mike Johnson pushed a rule through that prevented the House from voting on tariffs. Basically, it said that the House can't vote on tariffs till October. That's coming up here. So pretty soon they will be able to vote in 2 months. In addition to that, he's putting in more tariffs, threatening more. And then, of course, he's going after Chairman Powell again over they refused to cut rates yesterday. He wants the rates cut. They're saying there's too much inflation, and also they're saying, with the tariffs do create inflation, right, by design, because I guess another thing here is if I'm trying to think of this as like Donkey Kong, okay? If you're tariffing Donkey Kong, which we are, you need to have a domestic Donkey Kong, but we don't make Donkey Kong here anymore, okay? In fact, I don't think we ever did, but so now you're just paying more for Donkey Kong, and so that's inflation, right? Now you're paying more for it, and you have less money to go around. It creates inflation. So the Fed is waiting on it, and we will see. But, yeah, we're in a pretty disastrous situation. And I know the White House they're arguing, this is what they keep saying. The economy is doing so well, so they need to cut rates. But that doesn't really make sense if you have inflation still, and the economy is doing well, you keep the rates high, right? Because then there's no harm. Everything's going well. It's when the economy does poorly that you cut rates, right? So we'll see what turns out here, but these tariffs are ridiculous. I think the tariffs on Canada will come down, but the others, I don't know. The markets are all red today. We'll see how the bond market reacts to this, but simply put, they're just going to be paying a whole lot more for things. And they're coming after major manufacturers like Procter & Gamble, Amazon. I guess Amazon's not a manufacturer, but they are a marketplace. Walmart, and their demand. This is the part that drives me insane. They're demanding that they pick up the price for goods, right? They're demanding that you pay the tariffs. But like I said, if the whole point is that we're going to make things here again, Amazon needs to pass that price increase on to you, right? If they want you to buy an American ice tray that's $10, they need to tariff that Chinese ice tray and make it more expensive than the American one. So if Amazon's picking up the price difference there, then it's not doing anything. It's just generating income for the federal government. What do? You're just instituting a tax for no purpose. So this is why we kind of got rid of tariffs in the first place, because they were stupid. But yeah, welcome to our modern reality here. And
all right, I have a question about this. So
yeah,
I heard this last week some reports that some automakers, I think it was maybe GM, was reporting a significant hit due to tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay, but at the same time, I see people point to the economy and they say a lot in the administration are saying, look at like the stock market, it's unchanged. In fact, it's going up. And the pushback that I've seen people bring there is, yeah, well, the tariffs are just a vibe right now. They're not actually in place. So all you're seeing is really the market is just reflecting consumer sentiment. It's not actually the real impact of tariffs because they're not out there yet. I feel like
Correct.
That's saying both things. It's saying that an auto manufacturer lost money because of tariffs, but also the tariffs aren't impacting anything quite yet, and we need to wait for the actual impact. Can you help me understand those?
Yes, so the automakers were subjected to tariffs via Canada and Mexico, right? Those tariffs were in place, and then Mexico had theirs lifted, but Canada still had auto tariffs put in place, right? And then eventually they it's set there. But what everyone's also missing is that right now there's a current 10% default tariff on everything, on every country.
That is
every
in
country
place.
has
That is
Yes.
being. Oh, okay.
Yes. So everything has a default 10% tariff. And so that is the issue at play here, right? And that's how they're losing money. I also think the American car industry is probably done for. I mean, Japan is now going to be importing their cars with little tariff, while our companies are paying tariffs on the things they need to bring in to build cars here, right? As to where Japan is going to import these cars at less of a tariff than them. So the American car industry is probably done for, unless this gets figured out. So, and of course our national champion Tesla is not doing too well either. This is pretty nonsensical. And the craziest part is the unions of these auto workers are cheering it on, but they're just cheering on their death. So very foolish there. The move here, and I mean, the other thing we shouldn't ignore is that they removed the D- exception, I'm pretty sure I'm saying that wrong.
De minimis?
But essentially, if de minimis, thank you, is that when you import a package less than $800, you don't pay customs on it. You don't pay duties on it. So, for instance, if you get cookies ordered from Japan, or you get something shipped to you from a friend in Europe, or you buy something from Canada, as long as it's under $800, you're not paying tariffs. You're not paying tariffs. You're not paying duties on it. It's like globalization is how the American consumer is able to consume so much, right? It is Amazon. It's all of it. So now that they've gotten rid of that exception, prices are going to go up. And this is going to be a disaster for the American consumer. And it's kind of fallen by the wayside now because no one believes he's actually going to do it. And it's entirely possible we'll be back here next week saying, Wow, Taco, he chickened out again. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I think this is really, truly dumb.
All right. Well,
Is that
yeah, I don't know. I still feel pretty confused about all of it, if I'm being honest. Like
well? What
it's
are the
both.
questions you have?
No, it's not any of that. It's that it's there, but it's not there at the same time. Is where I struggle, right? Like, and the fact that things keep getting kicked down the road just makes it impossible to keep track of. Like, I heard a good explanation recently where some industry executives are saying, or some financial analysts were saying, in their talking to like executives, the executives don't know where the tariffs are going to be, so they can't figure out, like, they can't do projections. As in, like,
Yeah.
is it actually going to be bad? Will they be able to pass it on? Will it be not much of an issue at all? Will it borderline shut down their business? Because they can't keep track of, like, they don't even know. Because it's not as simple, like, especially in the auto industry where so many parts come from so many different places and then pass back and forth across the US-Mexico border so many times, they, like, genuinely can't predict right now. Like, they don't have the mechanisms. There's too many variables in there.
Yeah. Yep. You are correct. That's also why the Fed has a whole wait and see thing about it, right? Where it's like, we're going to have to wait and see if these tariffs actually go through, what we're going to do. I think what's interesting is there are court battles going on over this, where the argument is that Trump has created a fake emergency, and that, you know, the trade deficit is not a national security emergency as designated by Congress. And so they are lawsuits over this to strip him of his tariff authority. Mm-hmm. He is, I mean, so this is where his argument is that when I was president the first time, I was able to put tariffs on washers. And Obama, I think, put in like maybe 1 or 2 tariffs on some computing thing. And then Biden comes in, you know, he puts tariffs on chips or all this other stuff to kind of get things rolling. Trump's argument is, well, how come I could do it then and I can't do it now? And the argument is, well, you know, it's not a national emergency. It's just a trade deficit. So the argument here is that they want to strip him of that authority. We'll see if that happens. I think there is a real argument. I mean, the Constitution does put the authority of tariffs to Congress, right? Not the president. So we will see what happens.
All right.
I mean, the rule always, Taco always checks out, right? So Taco always checks out. But I do have some questions for you here.
Let's do it. Yeah. Gauntlet.
Okay. Yes. All right. America has had 3 great generals, Washington, Grant, and Eisenhower. Rank them based on ability, not accomplishment, and explain why.
I thought this was going to be a lot different than what it is right now.
No.
Grant, Eisenhower, then Washington, in that order. They had very different challenges, but Grant was pretty tactically proficient, and at the end of the day, kept our nation together. Washington, on the other end of the spectrum, national hero, no doubt. As a general officer, was not all that accomplished. Made a lot of mistakes, start to finish. His notable contributions to the United States. He did good work in the Revolutionary War, no doubt. But the big Washington story is his taking of office, I think, and deciding that he doesn't want to be a king and that he's going to step down when his term is up. So to me, that's the bigger Washington story. And then Eisenhower, awesome, no doubt. The biggest thing there, I think, that nobody's really dealt with in the same capacity is the logistical issue that he had to resolve. I mean, that's the reason. So one of the arguments as to why he was picked. I don't know if you know this. Eisenhower did not fight in World War I. He stayed in the United States. Oh. Yeah, thought his career was over. Like, that's it. Like, how can you, as a military officer, sit out the Great War? Are you kidding me?
Truman was in it. Yeah,
he was like, that's it. You know, the career is over. He was a logistician here in the United States. I believe got demoted when the military downsized, which wasn't a reflection on him, or maybe it was that he was a captain for like 12 years. Something, the rank did not work out well for him there, but eventually one of the reasons he was selected was the logistical nature of what the war would ensue and his relatively calm demeanor of being able to pull allies together. So Eisenhower's a great study in a lot of different ways, but I'd have to put Grant at the top, Eisenhower second, and Washington third.
Do you think Grant? Could Washington have beat the Confederates? Is my question. Here, actually, it's multi-part. Could Grant have beaten the Nazis? Could Washington have beaten the Confederates? And could Eisenhower have beaten the Redcoats?
Generals could go back. A good rule of thumb here is good generals can go back in time, and I think would be relatively successful, but they cannot move forward in time. A good example of that is in World War I, the change in how that fight was playing out between 1914 and 1918 was an entirely different type of warfare. In 1914, you saw cavalry charges and bright-colored uniforms, and by 1918, you had combined arms warfare with aircraft dropping bombs and conducting strafing runs coordinated with artillery and armored pushes. So a general in 1914, even in that window, you take a general from 1914 and drop him into 1918, he's in over his skis, in over his head. Can't figure out what to do.
How would Washington rack up? So I'm not going to compare Napoleon and Eisenhower. I'm not going to compare Eisenhower and Grant to Napoleon. But how would Napoleon stack up against Washington?
I think Napoleon again.
You think Napoleon would walk over him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Was General McClellan?
McClellan. Yeah.
Yeah. Was he that bad for non-Americans? McClellan was the first general of the U.S. Army during the Civil War, and then he was fired 3 years in and replaced by Grant. But was he that bad, or is it Lincoln that was the issue? What was the situation there?
Yeah, Civil War is not my depth of knowledge. I'm more of a World War I, World War II guy. But McClellan, from all of my understanding, McClellan was genuinely that bad. Probably could have been fired earlier. I don't know that there's much issue to take with Lincoln throughout the war with his handling of the conflict. By and large, he seems to have set a pretty good precedent. It is the civilian control over the military, but there were times where he seemed to have dabbled a little bit into strategy. But for the most part, he seems to have given the generals enough flexibility to carry out the campaigns they saw fit, and McClellan just wasn't doing anything at all. So, it's time to move on. And the Union went through a bunch of generals, a lot, before we finally had a solid batch there.
Yeah, Lincoln's whole thing is he kept writing to McClellan to attack, and he literally would not. And so then he got Grant and Sherman, who had no problem attacking at all. Do you think the government will eventually institute drone control?
What do you mean by
Given
drone
that
control?
So we see how they can be used in war. Here in the United States, drones are readily available. Do you think we will see a restriction on domestic use of drones, given that they could be weapons of war? I know we're not a nanny state, and we do have guns, so maybe it's more of a question for the UK. But do you think that's coming eventually?
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that, but I think it could. I feel like we don't often see something that is, I don't know.
They haven't been used here domestically, but it's not crazy to think that, a domestic terrorist.
Cartels used FPVs last week, man.
Yeah.
We're seeing countries around the world. Africa, we saw some rebel groups there using wire-guided drones last week. That's the newest technology coming out of this war, and all of a sudden we've got African rebels using them. So it's not hard to figure out how to make something go boom on the end of a drone. So my gut says yes, at some point we got to figure out a way to kind of keep that under tabs. I think what'll probably happen is there's going to be an event.
Yeah.
Somebody will use drones to do something bad, and then in reaction to that, we will see a clamp down on maybe the size of drones that are it might require some sort of licensing for certain size and above. And you can have the ones that fly around your house and crash into walls, no problem, but anything above that might end up with some sort of government control. I wouldn't be surprised.
The ATFD, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and drones.
There you go.
My last one here is, before Iraq and Afghanistan, the U.S. waged two counterinsurgency campaigns, the Barbary Wars and the Ku Klux Klan in the South in the 1870s.
Those are the two?
I believe so.
Okay.
There could have been more, but that's my understanding is that
Yeah.
the Barbary Wars is like the first rendition of a counterinsurgency campaign, and then, of course, what Grant was doing with the Klan in the South by having doors kicked in and stuff. How much do you think those two campaigns have impacted U.S. counterinsurgency strategy? Or if they gave, like, inspiration to it, but they don't affect it anymore? What do you think?
Can I go with any other counterinsurgency campaigns?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it, yeah.
Gotcha. I would jump forward to Vietnam because it's just maybe shot in the dark, but it could be a little more maybe fresh in people's minds and could be serve as a better jumping off point. Counterinsurgency seems like something that we relearn every single time. We tend to group Iraq and Afghanistan together as being one and the same because they happen at the same time, but they were incredibly different fights, incredibly different dynamics on the battlefield. And we saw things work in Iraq that did not work in Afghanistan. Namely, we did things in Vietnam that we didn't really even try, that worked in Vietnam, that we didn't really even try in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think that's a type of warfare that it's so unique to each piece of terrain. As an example, in Iraq, we had, I think it was called the Sons of Iraq program in the Sunni Triangle in the West during the surge, where we started arming Sunni tribesmen and village leaders and kind of created police forces there that were outside, kind of operating outside of the state, but they were protecting their local population against Al-Qaeda. Because Al-Qaeda was by and large foreign fighters plowing into that area at the time. So the U.S. kind of created a guerrilla army. We kind of dabbled in that in Afghanistan, but it just didn't take. And for whatever reason, the disparate tribes, the distance between locations, the long-standing feuds between tribes that were, there's more statehood in Iraq. It's like one town to the next, they still felt like they were Iraqi. But in Afghanistan, you go from one tribe to the next, and they don't feel any sort of unity, per se. So kind of a roundabout way to say, I don't know how much lessons we learn from previous conflicts when it comes to counterinsurgency, because so much is dependent on the human terrain.
What do you make of the argument that the U.S. is not brutal enough to successfully wage a counterinsurgency campaign? And everyone always references the British counterinsurgency campaign in Malaysia, where they successfully, or at least for a little bit, successfully put down the insurgents by being incredibly brutal. Do you think there is a valid argument there, or do you think the United States doesn't, I don't know, I know that for sure the American people do not have the stomach for some of the tactics others have done in the past, but do you think that the United States is perhaps too kind, and that's why they can't seem to do we wage successful counterinsurgency campaigns? And are we too kind as well? I guess that's a multi-pronged question, kind of all over the place, but hopefully you understand what I mean.
In terms of the too kind, not being strong enough, we had an interpreter in Afghanistan that used to tell us that. He said, you need to, we'd take fire from this series of abandoned buildings every day. And people didn't really live there. They'd kind of left the area, but there'd be civilians there every so often, kind of moving to and from their fields. And he made clear, he's like, you should just kill them all. This is ridiculous. Because that's the move. You kill them, and then that word gets out, and you don't have to worry about the Taliban using people's houses anymore because they know that you'll kill them when you come by. And of course, that was never in the cards, but that was his view. He's like, you're way too soft on these people. And I think that's probably our default because we did try to go over the top in terms of, in a lot of cases, our own forces would be put at risk, trying to go that extra step to mend the gap and be friendly and kind of be seen as a team player and on the same side. So I think the natural default there is, what if we go the other direction and we're just burning everything down? I don't know. Where has that worked? I feel like there's a few examples in each direction, but we were pretty heavy-handed in Vietnam, man. Plenty of examples of us really getting out there, village stability operations and kind of ink blot theory of trying to connect a bunch of patchwork groups that were under U.S. security. But there were also a lot of times where we just burned the shit out of a ton of forest and carpet bombed entire areas and destroyed villages because that was the way to save them, right? Sometimes to save a village, you have to destroy it, was one of the phrases that came out of Vietnam. So I think there's a middle ground there that, again, it requires, God, so complicated, man. There's a reason we're not good at this. Counterinsurgency is really, really hard. There are times where you need to drop the hammer and show force, and there's other times where you need to be willing to show restraint, and not engage when you might have the opportunity to.
Yeah, I would agree. But I also think,
Really messy.
I don't know, if the U.S. conducted itself like some of these other nations, I think we'd have a fit over it. I mean, I certainly would. I wouldn't like seeing that. So, yeah. Well,
times and places, right? There's
yes,
times and places. Like there were areas in Afghanistan, no doubt, we went into that were very friendly to the Taliban, no doubt. Like, and you could see it. Like they would tip the Taliban off to where we were going. They would pretend like they didn't know any of them, and a handful of them probably picked up weapons and fired at us as we left. But would have killing the village helped? Like, I don't know that would have done the trick, right? I mean, counterinsurgency.
Is Afghan food good?
I don't know. We mostly ate bread and rice.
Oh,
And it was pretty risky. So
I see.
Yeah, like we bought goat for our Afghan soldiers to eat, and they skinned it, hung it up, and then they would just carve off a piece whenever they needed to cook dinner, and that thing hung up in 100-degree heat for, I don't know, 3 weeks or something, and they're just flies covering it, and they would just kind of move the flies aside, carve off a piece of raw meat, cook it up, throw it in some rice, and go for it. Rice tasted good, but probably not. Yeah.
Yeah, that's nasty. But I bet if it was,
I'll bet in
there are a
Kabul
few
they got some good food. Yeah.
I bet, yeah, Kabul. I know in Washington D.C. they have a few places. I bet those places are banging.
We were like in the country is the way to put it. So it'd be like saying, is American food good? And it's like, I don't know, I only ate at like truck stops and dive bars in Oklahoma, right? Like, you're probably not going to.
I mean, that's the best place to get it.
Right, yeah, okay. So there's an argument there.
Yeah.
But I can't say that we got fully exposed to Afghan cuisine.
Would you ever go back?
Yeah.
Really? You go back and just for fun? Or
not right now. I would like to at some point.
Right.
Right now, you can't. But I would like to, given the opportunity, go back 100%.
Cool.
To be able to
All
see
right,
that,
well,
to be able to see that. I'm always jealous when I see, in a strange way, when you see the Vietnam veterans or World War II veterans able to go back and see some of the areas they fought over. I'd like to be able to do that someday.
I think that would be nice. I see the people who travel to Afghanistan. They tell everyone, "Oh, they have the nicest people here," and I fully believe. Every Afghan I've met has been very kind, but I'm pretty charming, Preston. But I don't know if I'm charming enough not to get detained by the Taliban.
No chance. Yeah,
So-
there's a sizable Al Qaeda presence in Afghanistan right now too. So even if you say the Taliban are trying to rehash their image, there's some baddies in a good portion of that country.
I
right
would
now.
also say it's just like not worth it, right? Like it's because as soon as you go to like Afghanistan or Yemen, then you can't go to some other countries in the world. You also like have to go through additional screening when you enter the United States. It's like a whole thing. You also you can't have TSA pre-check, and you can't have global entry.
Oh, I don't
Yeah,
know. That might be the line for me, man. Yeah.
That's look. If I had to start taking off my shoes at the airport, I'm not going to that country. All right, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I'll watch it on YouTube. Anyways, everyone, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed my questions for Preston, and we will see you next week. Remember to give us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple, comment on YouTube, and we'll see you again next time.